Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join our L1 webinar this afternoon. I'm quite excited about this topic, especially because it's the route that my family and I used to get to the USA. So L1 is very close to my heart. Just to start off, I want to introduce Immigrate to USA. It's a website that I created off the back of my own personal immigration journey as a resource for South Africans looking to immigrate to the US. Just providing a number of blogs, articles, resources just to guide and help and make it an easier journey. In addition to that, I've partnered with a number of immigration attorneys and consultants and specialists in the immigration space to provide reputable service providers to help South Africans looking to navigate this journey. So without taking up too much time, let me introduce Leon. Leon Fasfeld is from Fasfeld and Hugo Attorneys. They are an immigration firm. I've worked close with Leon over the last 3 years. He helped my family and I on our journey. And yeah, I just want to hand over to Leon. Will you just introduce yourself and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Kirsten. Goeiemôre en goeiemiddag en goeienaand waar ook al jy luister vanaf. My naam is Leon Versveld en ek is van Pretoria, Suid-Afrika. So having said that, since this meeting is being conducted in English, I'll rather switch over to the second language, English, and since this seminar is going to be conducted in English and talk about L visas coming to the United States, I'll switch over to English. So I graduated from the University of Pretoria. After that, I was admitted as an advocate and subsequently admitted as a solicitor in England and Wales. My journey took me to the United States. And over here, after passing the bar exam, I did a variety of litigation, both on the plaintiffs and on the defense side. And so with that journey, 9/11 happened, unfortunately, while I was here in the United States, and it dramatically changed the face of immigration. My practice gravitated towards immigration. It's funny on how clients would assume that because you're a lawyer, you're a foreigner, you must know something about immigration. But at the point in time, it was easy for me to kind of get started on immigration because those who've been practicing it for a while and those who are just getting into it, we're all starting to learn on how the new agency, the Department of Homeland Security, will be dealing with the sub-agencies that took over from the old INS and being divided into 3 agencies, the Department of Homeland Security having USCIS that adjudicates the L visas that we're going to be talking about, the Customs and Border Protection folks, the guys that meet you at the border, and then the guys that are very famous today, Immigration, Customs and Enforcement, enforcing the laws that are currently on the books that hopefully at some point can change. So I have practiced in the area of immigration for a significant period of time. My practice solely focuses on the employment-based side of immigration. And our office, however, do a variety of family immigration as well. We no longer do removal and defense work, but that's kind of the extent of what we do. My heart still lies with helping South Africans, especially just because that's where I'm originally from. But we represent companies and individuals from all over the world. We are located in the heart of America in Kansas City. And a lot of people oftentimes ask me, how is it possible that you can be practicing immigration in Kansas City? Shouldn't you be in Florida where there is a lot of immigrants, or Los Angeles or Texas? And the great benefit of practicing immigration law, it's fairly regulated. And so just like in South Africa, where I needed to hold one bar license to practice in the entirety of South Africa, the same is true for federally regulated practices like immigration, where it doesn't matter where you're at, you can practice from there and or anywhere for that matter. My wife is from Kansas City, so we made Kansas City our hometown. We've cultivated the best football team. If you haven't heard, the Kansas City Chiefs is still almost as great as the Springboks. But for that, I think I'll hand it back over to you, Kirsten, and we'll kind of get the show on the road.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so before we start, we will have a chat. I've got a few questions for you with a little bit of sort of knowledge from my own journey, but just to sort of share with the people that have joined us so that we can get a better understanding of the L1 and specifically as a route to expanding South African businesses into the US. Before we start, just to note, if anyone's got questions, if you can pop them into the chat and then we'll do a Q&A session at the end. But let's sort of just let's get started. So I think as a starting point, maybe you can just paint a picture for us as to what exactly is the L1 visa. How is it different to other visas? What is a simple picture of what it actually is?
So a couple of benefits of the L visa is that there's no limit on the amount of visas that are available, number one. Number two, it's also not country specific, which kind of distinguishes it from some other visa types, non-immigrant business visa types that it is. But in short, the L visa is referred to as the intercompany transfer visa. And so there are basically three legs upon which this visa application stems from. You need to be an executive or manager working in a foreign company, either wherever you, if it's South Africa or wherever you are, and having worked in a managerial or executive capacity for at least 1 year. Secondly, you need to come to the United States to work in a managerial or executive capacity. And three, there needs to be a qualifying relationship between the foreign company that you currently work for and have worked for the last 12 months and the newly formed or existing US company, either be a branch, affiliate, or subsidiary. The only thing that adds to that is if you're coming to the United States to form a new company, then you also need to show that you have secured sufficient premise in order to get your business up and going. In other words, this is not starting a business out from your basement or out of your garage or whatever the case may be. This would be something that is sufficient for the business that you're planning on starting over here.
Okay, so that's a nice intro, and I think that makes it quite clear to us. So who primarily within the business can come over on an L1? Is it always the business owner? Sort of what role is generally works for an L1 applicant?
So I want to distinguish there are actually the L1A for managers and executive, and I'll come back to your question that addresses that. And secondly, there's also the L1B for specialized workers, and I'll talk about that. But let's use a hypothetical. Let's just assume, since most of our audience is from South Africa, let's assume Coca-Cola was formed in South Africa. And Coca-Cola thinks that this is a great product. They're selling great. They're selling well. It's doing very well in the African markets, and they think that it will do very well in the United States. So at a board meeting, they decide they're going to open up a US branch or affiliate of Coca-Cola. Well, the first group of folks that they would probably send over would be a management or an executive team. Obviously, needs to make sure that those guys have worked for Coca-Cola South Africa for at least 1 year to qualify. They will set up a new company over here in the US, and from this qualifying relationship that they will set up from the US company and the South African company, they'll then be able to transfer some of these executives and managers over to the United States. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the owner of Coca-Cola South Africa. He may want to have his operations guy over there and the sales guy come over in order to kind of see the lay of the land, see whether or not this is going to work before they actually come to the United States. So that's number one. But then there's also the specialized worker. The specialized worker is that guy who may not have gotten matric or graduated high school, but he's the guy who invented the Coca-Cola syrup, the magic potion that actually sells the Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
So due to the proprietary knowledge that he has on his product, he is able to come over as a specialized worker. Now, a specialized worker doesn't necessarily need to have a degree, but it is someone who has very specific proprietary knowledge about the product that almost in a sense, you're not going to be able to be successful in the United States or anywhere else for that matter without this guy and or his team. So you can bring some of those specialized workers over as well. Specialized workers are also somebody who do have degrees, but that kind of goes without saying. Now, when you bring these folks over, they're also able to bring their family over. So An L visa allows for the spouse to come on over on an L2 and also kids under 21. Now, what is important to understand is when you bring your kids under 21, where the emphasis is, and your kid graduated high school, there's a very short window of time that he or she's going to be able to piggyback on your L2 visa. That child will fall off despite the length of how long the visa is after he or she turns 21. So it's good to start off with a good strategy on when you do individual families that are coming in to set up the new company, to understand the family dynamic and come up with a strategic plan in order to see whether or not everybody can be encompassed in that plan or that strategy. But this is a very popular visa for South Africans, especially. We have represented a ton of South African companies, big, small, and medium size, that come to the United States and have gained great success. One of our success stories is a gentleman who did these dent removals in South Africa, and very successful with in the industry that he's at. They also call it trolley dents in South Africa. And he realized by doing some math that there are more cars on the road here in the United States than are and ever will be in South Africa. And just the simple math and bringing his principle and his concept over to the United States, he's been very, very, very successful over here. I can probably share success story after success story of how South Africans have seen opportunities in the United States that goes by with ordinary American on a daily basis, and has grabbed those opportunities to make a success from.
So, I mean, I think the key sort of question, which I think maybe for myself I may have answered over the last sort of 3 years, but there's some like really successful business people in South Africa running great businesses, but there's a misconception. I mean, some of them are one-man businesses that by all accounts are extremely successful. Is that the kind of business that can sort of expand into the US? What are the challenges with the L1 visa? What are the biggest misconceptions around starting sort of a new division in the US?
So first, maybe let me address that first comment that you make. I will just maybe see if I can. I actually pulled up the law about this because we get this question all the time. I mean, at the end of the day, there's going to be interpretation by immigration on the legislation. And so our applications always lay out the law, as redundant as it may be, but as a reminder that this is the law that this is the rules that we all play by. So let's just remind each other about what those rules are. And this is how my facts apply to that rule. So for instance, let me quickly see, 8 CFR 214.2, the L subsection 1, 2, and A, talks specifically about the definitions and as it relates to managerial and executive capacity. And here's when it comes to executive capacity under subsection C, it says, if staffing levels are used as a factor in determining whether an individual is acting in a managerial or executive capacity, the Attorney General shall take into account, and here's the magic, the reasonable needs of the organization, component or function in light of the overall purpose and stage of development of the organization, component or function. An individual shall not be considered to be acting as a managerial or executive capacity merely on the basis of the number of employees that the individual supervises or has supervised or has directed. And so my point being is that this is obviously on a case-by-case basis. When we evaluate and sit down with people who want to come over, because to your point, there are some very successful entrepreneurs in South Africa that has figured out a way through systems and through other leverage on how to make a business successful. And this specific subcategory do specifically talk about what those staffing levels are, because an organization that is very employment heavy, let's just say a restaurant, it's going to need far more employees than someone who's coming over as a consultant. and providing, a professional service that may or may not need that kind of. The guys who are coming over to open up the restaurant, the Coca-Cola guys, who's going to need a factory, who's going to need a warehouse to store all of that. Their physical premise is going to be far bigger than what a consultant coming over here is going to, as a for instance, need a physical office with maybe an administrative person to handle the phone calls and or the intake of new clients. So this all goes down to a case by case basis. But the basis upon where all of this starts is with a good consultation, a great business plan, and then a good strategy on how we build from ground zero all the way to getting permanent residency. So oftentimes when we get started on a new L visa, we require, not that immigration requires, but we require that we have a good business plan. Now, obviously, with quite a lot of the entrepreneurs that we meet, they like, that is kind of the easy part. We can do that. In fact, we probably have one that we could just give to you. Well, I tell those folks that there are different business plans. If you want to go to the bank to borrow money, you're going to provide the banker a different business plan to show your likelihood of paying your mortgage or the loan back. If you want to entice an investor to invest in your company, your business plan is going to look different. You want to show that investor on how he's going to yield a return on his investment. And the same goes for immigration. There are certain emphasis on a business plan that we will help cater and massage to make sure that the lenses that immigration is going to use to review your business plan confines with some of these requirements that immigration is going to require from you, specifically when it comes to the staffing levels, where some people say, well, if you don't have 10 people, just forget about it. Or if you don't invest $100,000, just forget about it. Well, those are easy cases, but that doesn't mean because they are not easy that it can't be done. We have a saying here, the difficult we can do, the impossible just takes a little bit longer. Now, I'm going to be upfront with you. If we have a consultation and I believe your case is too marginal, I'll be upfront with you and tell you that your case is too marginal. There's some things that we need to adapt and things that you can do in order to kind of get to a position where we believe that we feel comfortable on how to articulate your case best with immigration. But at the end of the day, a strategy is where everything starts off, and a good consultation is therefore very invaluable to sit down and understand what the dynamics of the family is that we're going to be transferring over vis-a-vis the kids, vis-a-vis the mom, and also understanding whether or not what's the sustainability of the foreign company, because it is vitally important, because this is an intercompany transfer, that you keep the South African or the foreign company alive. It doesn't
Yeah.
help you uproot and come to America, and then the South African or the foreign company goes down. That basically nullifies the L visa and gives you zero chance for permanent residency. So the strategy then to begin with always needs to have an end in mind. And oftentimes when we start talking strategy to most of our clients, the first question needs to be, all right, is your intent to permanently stay here? And how do we get to the end as quickly as possible? Oftentimes people just want to get right off the bat and start with a green card process, but there's obviously facts that are not there that would create that circumstance. So for most folks who come to the United States to start up a new business, I would say that the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that we have a good business plan that is laid out and projects over the next 5 years on your hiring plans. It's going to project your capital input. It's going to explain how your hiring plan is going to leverage your staff in order to be profitable, and so on and so forth. And then secondly, once you have that first year under the belt, which I'll get to here in 1 second, very, very tough thing to do, then we go back to immigration and we go and explain to immigration how the next 2 years is going to look. So with an initial L visa on a new office, valid for 1 year, once you renew it in increments of 2 years. So the first year then becomes very, very tough, especially if you're coming to a foreign company, a foreign country, set
Mm.
up a new company. the other spouse is getting the kids enrolled into school, finding out what this grocery store is all about, because there is they have more than one type of white bread and one more than white type of brown bread, and so which one do you pick?
More than 300
Um,
types.
exactly. And so there's a lot of dynamic that goes on with the family, not just the actual principal applicant that comes over. And so making a success, in quotation, an immigration success of that first year is vitally important. And that kind of creates a lot of anxiety and stress with the initial applicant. But the way that we look at most of our um, petitions is have this discussion with the extension in mind. We want to understand from the outset, when we file the initial application with the extension in mind, that we are going to be at a level, and when we file the extension, that the company would have grown to such a position that we can show that the managerial or executive capacity is going to be supported in such a way that it will only fulfill managerial or executive roles. And then only after the first year, we have the visa under our belt. Now we're good for 2 more years. Only then we'll look then at the financials that will play a role with regards to looking at possible getting a green card out of the L visa category. Only then will we look to then determine strategy on when we need to file and determine whether or not we premium process that application. And only then do we then kind of again strategize, if we don't qualify now, what is it that we can do in the next year to move forward. Now, one other thing, Kirsten, that I oftentimes get is, these clients that we get, they are very clever. They're like, all right, Leon, I had a Delaware company. It's been going on for 3 years. And so I'm not coming over there to set up a new company because I already have an existing company. So having an existing company, I have looked at Facebook, and there's quite a lot of Facebook professors that says, yeah, this is not a new company. There's a lot of Facebook professors that have told me that now I can apply for an initial L visa. It's going to be valid for 3 years as opposed to the 1 year that you say. And even though I haven't hired any personnel, it does qualify me for the initial 3 year application and also possibly quicker to green card. The problem with that is that there are underlying facts for an initial L visa that requires the fact that there is good infrastructure in place already to support a managerial or executive role. If you've only had a company that's been on the shelf for a while, none of that infrastructure exists. If I
Yeah.
ask you for quarterly wage reports, if I ask you for tax returns, none of that is even available. And so oftentimes then it makes our life a little bit difficult because I now need to right off the bat tell immigration, listen, even though this Delaware company has been in existence for 3 years, we are wanting you to take off the lenses of the 3 year application and please put on the new office glasses to review our application under those criteria so that it could be successful, because it wouldn't otherwise be successful if you assume that this company is more than 1 year old and we should get a visa or green card out of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I I get that every application is sort of viewed on its own merits, and I mean, businesses differ vastly. The kind of one thing that always comes up is the business premises. I mean, since COVID, businesses have they've we've moved beyond business premises, right? I mean, I'm sitting in my home office right now. It doesn't mean I don't run a decent business. But I'm under the impression L1, there's got to be some sort of physical business premises. Am I right saying that?
Yes, yes. And there is, as part of the application fee, there's also a fraud prevention fee that you would pay. Let's take a
Mm,
scenario um, under which someone wants to apply for an L1 visa and he starts it out of his basement. Let's then assume that he gets an L1 visa and then he utilizes this, let's just call it the basement company, to attract some more people from, let's say, a country like India. And then what happens is the folks from India comes over. they then get placed in secondary off-site locations. And then it becomes the guy in the basement scooping money from getting the guy from India over here, hiring him out to a third party employer and scooping money and making a business out of basically being a staffing agency.
Mm.
So those are real facts. It makes it then very difficult for immigration to basically go visit the physical premise and understand where is this foreign national that you hired that I can interview, because site visits is becoming more and more a thing. It's
Okay.
always a thing. It's just becoming more of a thing under the
Mm.
current administration. So when they go do a site visit and they don't find Muhammad over there, then that's a problem. That's a problem not only for the business that have told immigration that they are doing XYZ, but in fact, they're doing something totally different. That's a problem because there is no control of the employee working on the site location, so on and so forth. But the bottom line is that's just one example out of why immigration needs a physical premise. They need to know that the
Okay.
rest of the world knows where your business is, where to go conduct business with you, even if it's a
Okay.
storefront window. Now, a lot of our companies that are small that just get started, they sign up for some of these virtual office share space, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Again, you need to be able to justify to immigration that your space is going to be sufficient for that initial application. And they may ask about that again come the renewal of that initial visa to understand that the space is sufficient. And whether or not the guy works from home or not, they're always going to need to have a designated place to come by. The domicilium it's tandi is what they refer to. The domicile and where your company is at
Yes.
is where they want to go to. They want to go on a loose goose chase to go find where your employees are working at. Because there is unfortunately quite a lot of fraud where employers
Yeah.
misuse these visas, L visas, H-1B visas, to the detriment of the foreign national. And immigration is here not to only just look after the integrity of immigration, but also after those foreign nationals that sometimes can be taken advantage of.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose it just lends to the credibility of the business and the application as a whole anyway.
Yeah.
You've mentioned family, which um, a spouse comes over on an L2, kids come over on the visa too. Obviously, as you said, the key is making sure that your older kids don't age out before you sort of make it to green card, which I think is key. One of the challenges that we sort of faced as a family, just personally, was the fact that uh, the kids can't work. They don't have work authorization. It may not appear to be that serious to people in South Africa because teenagers generally sort of don't get employed like they do here. But kids in high school here are working jobs. They get jobs easily. They work in the local. My son, well, now that he's got work authorization, works in the local publics. Um, and I feel like that was what maybe one of our challenges. It felt bigger at the time than maybe what it was, but just can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so there is currently work authorization implied with the L2 visa that's for the spouse. The principal
Yeah.
applicant has to work for the US company. The accompanied spouse can choose to work or not work, but can work anywhere. He or she can work for the foreign company or anywhere else. The benefit of getting work authorization for the spouse obviously has this ripple effect of getting him or her a social security number,
Hmm.
opening up a bank account, starting a credit, but more importantly, getting a driver's license. You're not going to get anywhere without a social security number and or the authority, the ability to work to try to get a driver's license. So that makes it very tricky to your point as far as the kids are concerned, because in the United States, at the crazy age of 16, they
Yeah.
let these kids loose on the street and they are able to drive. But they won't let them drink until 21. Not quite sure how it works. But anyway, so it does create a little bit of a predicament, but those are first world predicaments, I would say,
True.
saying, all right, well, look, my child can't work because he's got an opportunity to go work at the local grocery store, whatever the case may be. It's really just a matter of time. I mean, with the kids being at school and at that age, again, this is kind of one of those discussions that we have right up front to talk a little bit about what the strategy is, the end strategy. Our
Yeah.
our strategy is always the end strategy. How do we get to the green card as quickly as we possibly can? And sometimes in a very conservative way, sometimes in a very aggressive way. But there's an understanding between us and the client with regards to what that all entails. So challenging, yes, but I think at the end of the day, it's definitely overcomable. You will look back at this time in your life, and it would be like a day
Yeah.
in a lifetime, as opposed to what feels today like a lifetime,
Yeah.
because you don't have those immigration benefits.
So I suppose it's also it's really a matter of managing expectations.
Correct.
If you sort of have a good understanding of what lays ahead, it really makes it a little bit easier. You kind of touching on it as we talk. Let's sort of unpack L1 to green card. I know there's not one route. I know there's easier, quicker, sometimes more aggressive. What is sort of the common paths to green card? Just maybe uh, to sort of go back one step in terms of L1 being a non-immigrant visa. So you're actually not a permanent resident on an L1 visa.
Mhm. So the L1A, this is the one for managerial and executives, they max out at 7 years. So you'd better have a game plan within the next 7 years to
Yeah,
kind of
okay.
get to permanent residency, number one. Number two, the L1B maxes out at 5 years. Also need to have a game plan as far as that's concerned. Now, there's a couple of employment-based green cards that are available for people under the L1 category. And they are generally referred to in acronyms of an EB1C or an EB3 or even an EB5. So let's break that down. Naturally speaking, under the L visa, there is an application that you could make once you qualify. Facts more or less the same, with a little bit more of infrastructure and with a little bit more of capital outlay. Um, but filing the I-140, which is an immigrant visa petition for all immigrant workers, whether or not it is through a manager or executive or otherwise, that is a direct filing that you can do with immigration. And it's currently also, it didn't used to be, but you can premium process it. So you pay an extra fee to the government, and within 15 business days, they'll get back to you and give you some feedback on your case and or approve it. Now, once that case is approved under the I-140, then there is a green card set aside for the principal applicant and his family, kids under 21. So the setting side of a green card is the first step. The last and final step then towards permanent residency is if you're in the United States on a non-immigrant visa, you will do what is called an adjustment of status, an AOS. So there are three applications that we typically file with that application. It's the 485 that does the adjustment of the status, adjusting your status from non-immigrant L visa to that of the green card that's been set aside for you. And that process usually takes about 9 months or sometimes a little bit longer. But what they do is the other two applications that we file concurrent with that gives you an interim immigration benefit. And this is where it's very helpful for the kids. Each applicant, the principal applicant, spouse, and kids under 20, each individually file these applications, the 45. We also file for a work authorization and we also file for a travel authorization. Both those two, the work and travel, is only required that I have a 45 pending. It doesn't matter whether or not what your age is and so on and so forth. It really just matters that I have a 45 on file. So that's then greatly benefit that while you wait 9 months or longer for your green card to come in, with these immigration benefits of work and travel card, you get that within 5 to sometimes 6 months in the mail. That gives you basically the inherent benefits that you get out of permanent residency, which is travel freely without needing to stop at the consulate every time, and also work freely, right? And with the work comes a social security, with the social security comes a driver's license. So You are basically living like someone who's a permanent resident before you're even a permanent resident with those two benefits. Ultimately, once the green card does get approved, it's valid for 10 years. And then 5 years after getting that green card, then you're eligible for citizenship. And that's then the end of your US immigration journey. The other option is where, and this is the option that we typically do for um, the skilled workers or the specialized workers. It is a process that consists of three phases. The first phase consists of a labor certification, wherein we would need to go to the Department of Labor, show that we can't find a US citizen willing, able, and qualified to do the job. And after some recruitment and effort, if we can't find a US citizen willing, able, and qualified to do the job, the Department of Labor will give us a certification. So that process takes about a year and a half to a whole 2 years sometimes before we then get to the I-140 stage that I just talked about, setting aside a green card in that specific employment-based category, and then the subsequent 45. The problem with that application is, number one, it takes a very long time because of the first step that you need to take as far as the labor certification is concerned. But the other thing is also those categories are usually oversubscribed, which means that there are more applicants applying for those green card categories than there are green cards available. Congress only issues X amount of green cards in a specific employment-based category per year, and their fiscal year runs from October till October. So there's always a moving scale on the visa bulletin that we will need to determine what your priority date is vis-a-vis where you stand in line, because there could be then a long gap between the approval of the I-140, setting aside a green card based upon the fact we couldn't find a US citizen willing, able, and qualified to do the job, until such time that we file the adjustment of status if you're in the country because of the lack of availability of green cards. Then it becomes a little bit tricky to make sure that during the time the I-140 is approved and when we file the 45, that the person maintains status, needing to renew maybe some visas, or if that by that time we've run out of time, sending the person back and go getting his green card over in South Africa or in the foreign country that he's in. And last but not least, the other one that we've done is we have done the EB-5. The EB-5 basically consists of three options now. The first option is where you physically or you personally basically invest $1,050,000. The other option in your own company, in your own venture. And the other option then is where you go invest $800,000 into an approved immigration project, or $800,000 into an approved rural immigration project. And so those two are basically not part of the L visa, but the one that we sometimes convert over is someone who's been in the United States for an extensive period of time, and his business has basically grown so much that the equity that he's built in this business can convert into an EB-5, a direct investment, as they refer to it. And through that EB-5 direct investment, that person is then, him and his family is then eligible to do the EB-5 route as opposed to the other options that are available. And that can have some benefits and some downsides.
Okay. It's it's a lot. It's a lot.
So that's why this is a webinar, and Kirsten's going to send you a copy of this. You can go rewind. What did that guy say again?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
talk a little bit in slow motion. Sorry, I speak of this as if it's second language to me, and I know that there's a lot to digest, but this is kind of the strategy that we talk about up front
yeah,
when we visit with people, to understand again, when we talk the first day, what is the end in mind, and where do we start? We start at the end and work
yeah.
our way back then forward.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 7 years as if it's sort of a long time, but when you're in the trenches, the time just flies. I mean,
Mhm.
you were talking about the first year of an L1. I mean, I did a post yesterday about our experience of the L1, and you don't really have a year. You kind of have 8 to 9 months because you've got to
That's
start
right. Yeah.
planning your renewal, and it
Mhm.
it really just before you know it, it's there. So the time goes, and it's sort of that pre-planning in terms of your kids' ages and the whole process that's really so critical because you can get to that 7 year mark without even blinking and it's sort of gone by.
Yeah.
I sort of want to jump into the questions, although a lot of them we've covered, but just from your perspective, and obviously your goal is to succeed on your client's behalf. I mean, you don't want to be having families that are having to go back to South Africa. But you can't control their businesses or whatever happens. So what have you seen to be the biggest mistakes or sort of oversights by people that have come on L1s, and where they sort of in terms of not succeeding, what do you think are the biggest sort of reasons for that?
I think, due diligence is vitally important. We can get started and we can get going based upon a great business plan. But if you're coming over here to sell veldskoene or whatever the case would be, you're not going to find a market. Market may be very small. Even within the South African community, it will be small. So you need to do some due diligence as far as, your product and what it is that you want to come and do over here. I would say that's on you. I would say the other thing is also just be realistic with yourself and coming over. This is not the kind of visa that is meant for, let me just say, a mom and pop shop or um, an individual who wants to come over here because he's able to generate some money online or whatever the case may be. It stems from multinational companies, big companies that are needing to move their people back and forth in and out of the United States and or consolidate teams and so on and so forth. It does break down from big, large corporations to mid-size to small size. And obviously, the smaller it gets, the more difficult it gets because of the leverage, because of the margins that there are, and so on and so forth. So that's why bigger companies, it makes it's easier. And the smaller the company, the less margin there is for um, you know being successful on the second company on the extension. But again, like I say, this is one of those things where we try to be as upfront with our clients once we meet with them at the first time and just tell them, listen, this is a marginal case, or I think that we've got something here, but we set expectations right off the bat where it's like, hey, listen, it's going to be a tough weekend. And if you are set to come to South Africa or come to America or from wherever you're coming for, whatever reason you're coming over here, and you are determined to make it work, we are going to be on your side and we'll fight along with you. But I'm also going to tell you what the likelihood of success is. We don't guarantee any of our cases, but we will tell you what the likelihood of success is. And the great, we also um, I think that's the least we can owe our client is to at least be upfront and honest with them as far as the likelihood of success is concerned, and then have them make the decisions.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about sort of the process and planning, but I think you've sort of covered it. It really comes down to a consultation in terms of having a chat around the business. This is what it is, and then you would give the advice in terms of whether you think that it's workable. What is sort of the step-by-step process if someone wants to sort of embark on this journey?
Yeah, so we have a consultation that we usually set up. And during that 15-minute consultation, there are certain questions that we'll ask, certain questions that we ask about your current company, your plans of coming to the United States, what the timing is of doing this, and so on and so forth. And we usually assume that by the time people call us, that they have a good idea of what it is that they're going to be doing in the United States. It's not our job to help explore options for you in the United States. This country is way too
Mm.
big for me to even comment on the quality of schools, and because just in your jurisdiction where you live, I mean, there's different schools, as of for instance. So we keep our focus on the immigration aspect of things, and we expect clients that have consultations with us to have at least have done some due diligence, know what they're going to be doing in the United States, where they're going to be doing it, and then from there we come up with a game plan. We give them a price of what it will take in order to, and all of our prices are flat fees, so there's great degree of certainty as far as cost is concerned. Um, and so we give them a contract. Once we get the contract back, we open a file and then we start collecting documents. We have a immigration software that collects documents in a secure portal that you can upload onto your portal with our immigration software that also keeps you up to date and gives you access to your file, any time of the day. It also gives you updates that when we file the immigration case to go into your portal to see what immigration is doing and where immigration is currently at as far as the status of your case is concerned. You can follow your journey from there. Come closer to the time of that first year expiration, we set up another call with our existing client, find out where things are at, how things are going, and then start talking about the preparation of the renewal of that visa and what else needs to be done in the remaining months before we file that application. Come up with a strategy as to whether or not we're going to file the application in the United States with the ability to remain in the United States and continue on, or filing that approval in the United States and then sending the client back to the consulate to get a visa sticker, because it is important to understand that the approval notice that you get in the United States is not a visa sticker. There is no consulate or mechanism in the United States where you can take your approval notice and go get a new visa sticker. You can also not enter the United States without approval notice. So it's important that once that visa sticker in your passport expires, and you leave the country, that you need to have a new valid visa sticker in your passport, and that is usually done with a renewed approved petition. So all of these strategies is what we talk to people about right off the outset.
Okay. So let's see if there's some questions. I think we might have already covered some of what's been asked here. There was a question around size of premises. I think we've covered that. It's the key is that there's got to be premises. Size depends on the type of business, and whatever, sort of what you're running. I don't think there's a formula there. Um,
I have one
this
here.
is
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, this is just about the timing out. Dependent on L1, eldest would arrive at 20 years. She'd have 7 months before she turns 21. Can you apply for a green card within that time? So her age is
So I can
frozen.
quickly address that. So the thing is there's something called the Child Status Protection Act. It's a very complicated, I would say, calculation that basically freezes a child's age once the I-140 is filed. So there's a lot to be discussed to determine if you're eligible to file that I-140, the immigrant petition, to set aside the green card. But in any event, should you be eligible, and we do file an immigrant petition, and either it be the I-140 for the multinational executive and or an EB-5, the child age then gets frozen for immigration purposes. So if that child was 20 at the time of filing, and it takes the government a year, whatever the case may be, to adjudicate that case, upon approval of that case, the child's age will then be 20. Even though the
Okay.
real age would may be 21 or older, will be 20. And then from there on, there's a calculation that needs to be made to determine if the child still be considered in. But there's no Child Status Protection Act, unfortunately, for non-immigrant visas. So a
Okay, so
child
that's
literally
yeah.
falls off once your visa sticker, once that child turns 21. And so sometimes you'll see if the family goes to the consulate and if Peter, he only got a visa that is too valid for 1 year, where the rest of the family got theirs for 2 years. Well, it's because within 1 year, Peter is going to turn 21. So as part of our discussion, we also talk to the family unit of what are we going to do with Peter? Is there a
Yeah.
mechanism for us to get to a green card fast enough? Sometimes, maybe not. But then let's figure out a plan for Peter on how we keep him here and keep the family together. Sometimes that's difficult, sometimes it's impossible, but we do have discussions around that.
Okay. So I mean, in layman's terms, you've got to get to sort of in that green card filing to start the freeze on their age.
Correct. And that's why all
Not,
of our consultations start at the end and we work our way
yes.
back.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
sometimes we have some people where the company would start a labor certification. and the person is not even here. They may not even be here for the next 2 years. And so we'll file a labor certification, and or we can file an I-140 if they're eligible, with the person still being outside of the United States. And the US companies start that process already over here, um, giving them the ability to come over. But then oftentimes, if that is our end plan, what do we do in the meantime to get that family over here? Sometimes there's no visas available, and we have to just wait until the process runs out. And so people wait in the foreign country before they can come over.
Okay. Second marriage, not my children by blood. I don't know if that's clear enough in terms of.
I think that question ties into what qualifies as a child, obviously a biological child, duh. And then the other one that qualifies for immigration purposes is if your children were under the age of 18 when you got married to the principal applicant, they can also piggyback on that.
Okay. Um, Someone's asking, is there some sort of list of South African companies in the US? Is there a cost involved in such a list? I'm not familiar about that one. I would say it's a process of networking. I don't know if you're familiar with
I
such
don't know
thing. No.
about a list, no.
Um, what is the ideal time to begin the green card application while on an L1B visa and through which visa categories? Okay, so I think we've covered that.
Yeah, the L1B definitely going to need to start a labor certification, and you want to talk to your employer about getting that started as soon as possible, just because it takes very, very long. The labor certification in of itself is a year, 2 years, and so the sooner you go stand in that line, the quicker we can get to the adjustment of status phase in order to keep you here before that L1B expires. So that will be something you want to talk to an employer right off the bat, and something that an employer can start. Unlike the L1A, where we need to go verify the infrastructure, because the criteria for the L1A that turns into an EB1C has different criteria. I don't need to go show that I can't find another executive
Yes.
and go advertise and all that. So the criteria is different. The L1B, on the other hand, the criteria is different when I need to go advertise that position. And, in countries other than America, the unemployment is so high. They're like, well, Leon, I'm going to find an American, and then what? No, the unemployment is so low. They have us advertising the Sunday paper. Nobody buys the damn Sunday paper anymore. So the long and the short of it is your chances of going through that process is pretty good, just because of how the current laws are. But you want to start that sooner because that time takes so much longer. And the company can get it started, because even though if they are new, they can get that process started for you also right away.
Will the L1 work for a case where a larger established American company wants to buy a South African company in order to transfer intellectual property and employees? To what extent would the South African company have to be kept staffed and operating, software company in this case, if that matters?
It's a very good question, a scenario by which we oftentimes get involved in. So the short answer is yes. Um, the details lie in a consultation to understand what the function of the South African company is going to be after the merger, after the acquisition, in order to make sure that we keep the intercompany transfer relationship until such time that those staff members have been green carded. Where after that, obviously, we don't require an ongoing intercompany relationship in order to, or qualifying relationship to get that going. So that's a good consultation to have with regards to how we make that happen. And in fact, that kind of scenario would lend itself to an initial L visa application coming over as 3 years, because it's a large US company that has some infrastructure, that has quarterly wage reports and all the stuff that we're going to need. We'll be able to bring those initial L visa applicants over on a 3-year visa as opposed to the 1 or 2 years that we talked about previously. And also
Okay.
maybe even start talking about green cards right off the bat because of the established US company.
Okay. Um, let's have a look. Can the L2 visa holder spouse be sponsored for a green card through their own employment?
They can, yes. So we oftentimes, part of our strategy is the more lines you have in the water, the more likely it is that you're going to catch some fish. So absolutely, the more options that we can come up with, the better it is for you. Sometimes it's really just kind of a matter of money, which I try to be sensitive about what that cost is, but this is also the very foundation upon which you're going to build your life in the United States.
Mm,
So it's vitally important, almost more so than buying a house. But needless
yeah.
to say, the more options that you have, the better. So oftentimes you find yourself where the wife has now found a company, that company wants to sponsor her through a labor certification, all that kinds of stuff. And so that spouse will get a green card. Then inherently the principal applicant who came over on the other L visa working for the company may need to wait, or the company don't want to do it. So because one spouse gets it, the rest of the family gets it, and vice versa.
Okay. I think we've covered most of the questions to the guests. I will share the recording as well as contact details for anyone that wants to sort of have further consultation with Leon. So we'll do that afterwards. But yes, thank you, Leon, for your time. Hugely valuable. I think the L1's exciting. It's stressful, but if you can make it work, it's really a great route to the US and exciting for South African families. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. For those that are interested, we're hosting a webinar in 3 weeks on O1, just as another alternative. Join us for that one. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you to everyone who joined us.
Only my pleasure. Thanks so much, Kirsten. Take care.
Cheers.